What happens when one deleted text doesn't delete the truth? Why does a husband stay silent while packing a suitcase the same morning a legal envelope arrives at the door? Can a wife still call him controlling when the consequences come in daylight with witnesses? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm the kind of woman people think has everything under control, and honestly, I used to believe that too. I thought I was smarter than consequences, smoother than guilt, and definitely better at hiding the parts of myself I didn't want anyone, especially my husband, to see. For a long time, I told myself little stories that made me look good. I said I was just bored, just misunderstood, just wanting a bit of attention to feel alive again. I never called it what it really was. I didn't plan for one text to start all of this. I miss us. 2 simple words I sent to my ex without thinking, without considering how fast a moment of weakness can turn into something much bigger. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't mean anything, that Jonas would never even know. But he did. And the way he reacted still plays in my head, because he didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't make a scene. He just looked at my phone, set it down gently on the counter, and walked away to pack his suitcase in complete silence. That quiet, his quiet, felt heavier than any fight we ever had. And it was only the beginning. I'm not proud of how the morning started, but I also refuse to pretend I'm the villain everyone later called me. In my mind, I was just taking a little breath from the pressure of being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect woman who never slips. Jonas always acted like he didn't need anything from me except honesty, but the truth is, he demanded steadiness without ever saying so. I woke up that day feeling restless, the kind of restless that makes you scroll back through old messages you shouldn't even keep. And when I saw Elias's contact, I don't know, something in me softened. He used to make me feel like I mattered without me having to try. I sent the text, "I miss us," the way someone might toss a pebble into a lake just to hear a sound. It didn't even feel dangerous. I deleted the thread right after, told myself it was a moment of nostalgia, not a real step. Jonas was in the shower, humming the same off-key tune he always hummed on Mondays. I remember thinking how predictable it all was, how I could map out the entire day before it even happened. I told myself that was the problem, not me. It's funny how you can rewrite reality in your head if it helps you feel right. I left my phone on the counter while I made coffee. Jonas came down earlier than usual, hair still damp, towel slung over his shoulder. He said something about his meeting running long. I nodded without really listening. I was more focused on stirring sugar into my cup and on the faint nervous buzz I still felt from sending that text. My phone lit up just then. I didn't think much about it until I saw Jonas glance at it. His eyes stopped. I knew that look, the quiet blinking he does when he's trying to make sense of something he wasn't prepared for. My stomach dropped. He asked why Elias's name was on the screen. His voice wasn't sharp. It was calm in that way that rattles me more than yelling. I said it wasn't important. I said it was just a mix-up, a leftover contact I forgot to delete, a simple misunderstanding. I piled excuses one after another, each sounding thinner than the last. Jonas didn't argue. He just looked at me, then at the phone again, then back to me. He didn't need to say anything. His silence did the whole job. He placed the phone gently on the counter, like it was something fragile he didn't want to break. Then he walked upstairs. At first, I thought he was going to get dressed. I even opened the fridge, pretending everything was normal. But then I heard it, the soft creak of the hall closet, the muted thump of his suitcase hitting the floor. I froze with my hand still on the milk carton. When I climbed the stairs, trying to rehearse some cute, annoyed line about him being dramatic, I saw him carefully folding shirts into that dark blue suitcase he only used for serious trips. I asked what he was doing. He didn't answer. He kept folding as if each crease mattered more than my voice. I said he was overreacting. He said nothing. I told him it was a joke, that I didn't mean anything by the text, that he was blowing it all out of proportion. He placed a pair of socks on top of the shirts and zipped the suitcase halfway, still without a word. That silence made me angry in a way I didn't want to admit. I told him he couldn't just decide to leave over one tiny mistake. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look up, not even once. He walked past me with the suitcase, down the stairs, through the hallway. I followed him, repeating the same arguments, each sounding more desperate than the last. He set the suitcase by the front door, straightened the handle, and finally spoke. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask for explanations. He simply said he needed space. Those words stung more than shouting. Space meant distance, and distance meant he had already made up his mind about me. I asked if he was seriously doing this before work. He said yes, still calm, still steady. I told him we had a daughter to think about. That made him pause, but only long enough to say he'd see Ivy after school. He stepped outside before I could say anything else. The door clicked behind him, soft but final. I stared at the spot where he'd been standing, confused by how fast everything had shifted. I tried to convince myself he'd cool off. Jonas always cooled off. It was his pattern: silence, then calm, then forgiveness. I stood by the kitchen island and looked around for proof that things were normal. 2 mugs on the counter, mine with lipstick, his rinsed clean, his work badge still hanging on its hook, a faint smell of coffee in the air. All the signs of an ordinary morning, except the suitcase wasn't there anymore. When I stepped back into the kitchen, I noticed something small and strange, a sticky note on the fridge that hadn't been there before. It didn't have a message, just a single scribble that looked like a reminder to himself. I couldn't read it well, but the time written looked like 3:45 p.m. Jonas never wrote reminders. He kept everything in his head. I told myself it meant nothing, probably just an errand or a work thing. But the quiet of the house felt different, like something had shifted in the walls. I brushed it aside, trying to steady myself. I stood at the window, watching the street. Jonas's car didn't pull back in. No text came through. I checked my phone again, already rehearsing explanations in case he asked. But the screen stayed blank. I told myself he'd call when he calmed down. But noon came, then 1, then 2. The sticky note stayed on the fridge. His silence stayed in the air. And the house, once predictable, suddenly felt too wide, too still, too full of questions I wasn't ready to answer. The restaurant felt too bright when I walked in, all polished floors and clinking glasses. And for a moment I considered turning around. But my mother insisted on this family lunch, said it would ground me, after the little misunderstanding with Jonas that morning. She said misunderstandings happen in marriages, and husbands occasionally need to be reminded not to take everything so seriously. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think this would all just blow over. Rafe was already at the long table, grinning like he was waiting to hear gossip. He always loved when things in my life got messy. He called it entertainment. I called it loyalty, though deep down I knew it wasn't. My mother hugged me a little too tightly, then immediately started talking about how Jonas was overly sensitive, as if she had been in the kitchen that morning. I let her talk. It was easier than thinking about the look in Jonas's eyes when he saw the screen light up. The waiter brought water, and Rafe leaned in asking where Jonas was. I said he had a long day at work, keeping my tone casual. My mother didn't help. She added loudly that maybe Jonas needed to cool off after jumping to conclusions. I forced a laugh. The truth was, I had texted him twice before I left the house and gotten nothing, not even the 3 dots showing he was typing. That wasn't like him. We ordered food, and the conversation turned to plans for Ivy's school play. My mother asked if Jonas would be able to take off work for it, and I shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. Inside, though, I felt a tiny pinch of panic. Jonas never missed Ivy's events. Never. I told myself he was still mad, that he'd get over it. Men always get over it when they realize home is still their safest place. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed again. I didn't look at it right away, but Rafe did, raising his eyebrow. He asked if it was Jonas apologizing. My mother snorted and said, Jonas should be the one apologizing to me for making a mountain out of a molehill. I finally checked the screen. It wasn't Jonas. It was a notification from a friend tagging me in a photo. I clicked on it, and my stomach knotted. It was from last week, me laughing a little too hard at something someone said during a girls' night. My phone was in my hand in the picture, angled in a way that made it look like I was sending something secretive. My mom said I looked beautiful. Rafe said it looked like I was up to something spicy. I rolled my eyes and said people could interpret anything however they wanted. But then the comments under the picture caught my attention. Someone had written, Jonas looks tired lately. Another wrote, hope everything's okay at home. I felt something tighten in my chest. People were noticing things I didn't think anyone could see. Then Jonas walked into the restaurant. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry either. He was something else, neutral, unreadable, like a man standing behind glass. I waved, thinking he came to join us, ready to smooth things over. But he only approached the table long enough to say he was picking up the paperwork he left in his car. Paperwork? He never mentioned anything like that. He said hello to my mother, nodded to Rafe, and looked at me for half a second. I opened my mouth to ask him to sit, to at least stay long enough to talk, but he stepped away before I could form the words. Rafe muttered that Jonas was being dramatic. My mother agreed, saying he was trying to get attention. I pretended to believe them, though that flicker in Jonas's eyes told me he wasn't performing for anyone. He disappeared outside, and I stared after him, feeling something cold spread through my chest. I told myself he'd return in a minute. He'd sit beside me, order his usual sandwich, and everything would settle. But minutes went by. 10, 15. He didn't return. The waiter came with our food. My mother asked me why I looked so tense. I told her Jonas was acting strange, and she said it was because men hated feeling wrong. Rafe added that Jonas probably needed time to man up and accept his wife has a past. That irritated me. I said I didn't even do anything wrong. They both nodded, feeding the version of me I wanted to believe. But while they talked, my eyes drifted to the window. Jonas was standing near his car, speaking to someone I couldn't see clearly. He was holding his phone, tapping something, nodding slowly. He didn't once look back at the restaurant. Then a van pulled up near him. Not threatening, not dramatic, just a normal delivery-type van. The driver handed Jonas a small white envelope. Jonas thanked him, placed it in his jacket, and drove off. My mother kept rambling about how I needed to remind Jonas that relationships required realistic expectations. I wasn't listening. I was replaying the moment outside, the way Jonas stood with that envelope, the way his shoulders looked steadier than they'd looked all morning. Rafe took a picture of his dessert and tagged everyone at the table. 2 minutes later, I was tagged in another photo, me glancing out the window with a strange expression on my face. People online started commenting again. Little jokes about me, dreaming about something spicy, questions about why Jonas wasn't sitting with us. I suddenly felt exposed, like every angle of my life was on display for people to interpret however they wanted. I put my phone face down on the table. I told myself Jonas was just doing errands. That envelope meant nothing. Maybe he had documents from work. Maybe it was a receipt he forgot. Maybe. My mother suggested ordering dessert. Rafe teased me about being distracted. I forced a smile. The table clattered with plates and laughter. I tried to join in. I tried to pretend the air around me wasn't shifting, but the truth was simple and terrifying in a way I didn't want to admit. Jonas didn't look lost. He looked like a man who had already made a decision. I sat there, nodding at whatever my mother said, chewing food that tasted like cardboard, pretending everything was normal. But the window beside me stayed empty. Jonas didn't come back, and for the first time all day, I wondered if maybe he didn't plan to. I walked into the office the next morning, telling myself I looked fine, that no one could possibly know anything was wrong. But the second I stepped into the billing room, the air felt different. People weren't talking as loudly. A few looked up, then back down at their screens a little too quickly. I told myself it was just the usual Monday mood, but a tightness settled in my chest anyway. Chelsea from the front desk asked if everything was okay at home. She tried to sound casual, but her eyes stayed on me too long. I said Jonas was being dramatic, that men sometimes spiral over nothing. She laughed politely, though it didn't reach her eyes, and went back to typing. The tone bothered me. It was like she already had an opinion about something she shouldn't even know. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, pretending to dive into spreadsheets, but my mind kept drifting back to the image of Jonas outside the restaurant, receiving that envelope. I told myself it was probably work-related, that Jonas was just caught up in some project. Still, the thought kept pushing into my head like a draft under a door. Around mid-morning, I stepped into the break room for coffee. 2 co-workers were whispering by the fridge and stopped when they saw me. I forced a smile. One of them asked if things were okay between me and Jonas. I asked why everyone suddenly cared. She shrugged and said someone posted a picture from the restaurant the night before. I felt heat rise in my face. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through tags, and found it. It was the picture of me staring out the window, looking tense and distant. The caption someone added was, "Rough day?" I hated how vulnerable I looked. I commented back some joke about Mondays, trying to make it seem like no big deal. But seeing myself like that made something twist inside me. That was when the door opened, and Elias walked in. He gave me that easy smile he always had, the one I used to think meant I was special. He asked how I was, voice low like we shared a private world. I said I was fine. He asked if Jonas was still on edge. The way he said it irritated me. It felt like he was too comfortable talking about my marriage. I said Jonas needed to relax and stop assuming things. Elias nodded like he understood me better than anyone else. I didn't correct him. He offered to join me for lunch, and for a moment I almost said yes. But something in me hesitated. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe instinct. I told him I had plans. He smiled again, said it was no problem, and grabbed a protein bar from the counter. As he walked out, Chelsea's eyes followed him, and then drifted to me. That look told me she was putting pieces together I didn't want anyone holding. The rest of the morning dragged. I sent Jonas a message asking if he'd be home for dinner. No response. Another message, asking if Ivy needed to bring anything for school. Still nothing. I called once during my break. It rang twice and went to voicemail. I told myself he was busy. He always had a lot on his plate. But usually he at least sent a thumbs up if he couldn't talk. By lunchtime, I needed to get out of the building. I walked to my car in the parking lot, breathing in the warm air, trying to calm myself. I pulled up the messages between Jonas and me and scrolled through the last few months. There were plenty of normal conversations, school reminders, grocery lists, jokes about Ivy. But I noticed I hadn't sent him anything affectionate in weeks. It wasn't something I had done intentionally. It was just life, stress, routine. I didn't like the guilt stirring inside me, so I pushed it away. I was about to start the car when someone knocked on my window. I jumped. It was Elias. He said he saw me walk out and wanted to check if I was sure about not grabbing lunch. I told him I was busy. He leaned closer to the window, said I looked upset. I said I was fine. Then he said Jonas was lucky I was even trying. That comment made me uncomfortable, though I didn't show it. Before I could respond, a woman walking past slowed down and stared at us. Her phone angled slightly, suspiciously. I straightened in my seat. I told Elias I really needed to go. He nodded and walked off. As I backed out of the parking space, I caught the same woman still watching in the rearview mirror. She typed something on her phone. The pit in my stomach grew heavier. I drove to the supermarket to clear my head. I walked inside without a list, wandering the aisles aimlessly. I picked up things we probably didn't need: frozen meals, snacks, cleaner for the kitchen. At the checkout, the cashier mentioned she saw a picture of me online. She said it casually, not cruelly, but it made my heart thud harder. I joked that my family always caught me at bad angles. She smiled awkwardly. On the drive home, I kept glancing at my phone. Still nothing from Jonas. When I got to the house, it felt emptier than usual. Jonas hadn't been home. The lights were off, shoes still missing from the hallway. I went upstairs to check if he had at least changed clothes, but the bedroom looked untouched. The guest room door was slightly open. I peeked in. His pillow was pressed down on one side. The blanket he used was folded neatly at the foot of the bed. That level of neatness wasn't like him. When I turned to leave the room, something caught my eye on the desk. His laptop, closed, and next to it, a single USB drive labeled with yesterday's date. My stomach flipped. Jonas never labeled anything. He barely saved documents with proper names. I picked it up but didn't open it. A chill ran down my neck. I put it back exactly where it was. Then I heard the garage door opening downstairs. My pulse jumped. I rushed down the hallway, telling myself Jonas was finally home, ready to talk, ready to act normal again. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, he wasn't coming in. He was in the driveway, standing by his car, sorting through something in the trunk. He didn't look up. Not even when I opened the door and stepped outside. I walked over, trying to act casual. He nodded at me, polite but distant. In the trunk were several folders, clean, organized, labeled. Utilities. Bank. Household budgets. I pointed at them, asking what he was doing. He said he was sorting things. His voice was steady, controlled. I told him he was taking things too far. He said he didn't think so. I tried to joke, saying he was acting like he was preparing for something serious. He didn't smile. He picked up a folder, closed the trunk, and said he needed to finish something before dinner. Then he walked past me into the house. Leaving me standing in the driveway holding a bag of groceries, I suddenly didn't feel like carrying anymore. For the rest of the evening, he stayed in the guest room with the door slightly ajar, typing slowly, methodically. I listened from the hallway, waiting for some hint of emotion, some familiar sign he was about to soften. But the only sounds were quiet typing, and the soft beep of his phone every so often, a beep I didn't recognize. When I finally lay down in bed that night, the silence felt heavier than anything he could have said. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe Jonas wasn't waiting to forgive me. Maybe he was preparing for something I didn't see coming. The community hall smelled faintly of frosting and lemonade, the usual scent for kids' birthday parties. Balloons bumped softly against the ceiling fans, and parents stood in little clusters, pretending to enjoy small talk. I kept telling myself this would be good for us, that being around people would force Jonas to act normal again. He was never the type to make a scene. He always held himself together in public. I thought I could use that. I arrived with Ivy right before the cake cutting. She ran off to her friends, leaving me standing alone with a wrapped gift and a growing knot in my stomach. Jonas was already there, talking quietly with the birthday boy's father near the drink table. He didn't look upset, but he didn't look like my husband either. Something about the way he stood, straight posture, arms loosely crossed, eyes steady, felt distant. Not angry, not hurt, just resolved. I walked over, trying to act cheerful. He greeted me politely, like we were co-workers. That irritated me more than anything he'd done so far. I told him we needed to talk later. He said we could. His tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't warm. It was neutral, and that neutrality felt like a wall I couldn't climb. My mother appeared out of nowhere, looping her arm through mine. She told Jonas he looked tired and needed to stop stressing everyone out. Jonas nodded, not rising to her bait. That annoyed her. She liked arguments she could win. When he stayed calm, she turned her attention to me, whispering that I shouldn't let him guilt-trip me. I told her he wasn't guilt-tripping anyone. She smirked, as if she knew better. Across the room, I saw Mira, Jonas's mother, speaking softly to Ivy while adjusting her hair clip. When she noticed me watching, she gave a small nod, not unkind but not warm either, like she was studying me, deciding which version of me she believed. That made something in my chest twist. Rafe arrived late, loud as always, calling my name across the hall like he was stepping into a comedy show. He hugged me and immediately joked about the great marriage meltdown. I laughed weakly, telling him he was exaggerating. He asked where Jonas was. I gestured toward him. Rafe lifted his eyebrows at the sight of Jonas speaking calmly with another parent. "Man looks like he's about to take a professional headshot," he whispered. "What's with him?" I didn't know what to say. Jonas looked composed in a way that didn't match how things felt. Almost too composed. Rafe shrugged, said Jonas was probably being sensitive again, and wandered off to the snack table. The kids gathered for cake, and adults circled the table. I tried to stand beside Jonas, but he stepped slightly to the side, making space without making it obvious. I felt the shift like a cold breeze. I leaned closer and whispered that we should at least act normal for Ivy's sake. He said he was acting normal. His voice was low, steady, not unkind. That tone made my throat tighten. During the cake cutting, a parent raised a phone to record the moment. When the screen turned toward the group, I instinctively straightened up, putting on a bright smile. Jonas didn't shift at all. He didn't link hands with me, didn't lean closer, didn't give any sign we were together or not. It was like he'd practiced neutrality. After the candles were blown out, Ivy pulled Jonas toward the craft table. She told him she wanted him to help her with glitter glue. Jonas smiled at her, soft and gentle, the way he always did. She looked over her shoulder at me and asked if I wanted to join. Before I could move, Jonas told her I should go enjoy myself, that he had it covered. He said it lightly, but the words landed sharp. I went to pour myself a cup of lemonade I didn't want. My mother followed, telling me Jonas was being cold. She said husbands should know better than to hold grudges. I told her to drop it. She didn't. She never did. Mira approached then, touching my arm. She asked if I was doing all right. There was no judgment in her voice, only something sad, quiet. I nodded and said Jonas was just processing things. She held my gaze for a long moment before saying, this wasn't something anyone could process quickly. I hated how steady she sounded. When she returned to Ivy and Jonas, I watched the three of them laugh together. Ivy flicked glitter on Jonas's shirt, and he acted shocked, making her giggle. They looked like a picture-perfect pair, father and daughter sharing a joke. I used to be part of those moments. Now I was watching from the edge of the room while holding a lukewarm cup of lemonade. A parent I barely knew approached me and commented that Jonas seemed very organized lately. I asked what she meant. She said she'd seen him earlier writing something on a notepad, then folding it neatly into his jacket. She thought it was sweet how seriously he took things. I didn't think it was sweet at all. When I looked again, Jonas had stepped away from the craft table to answer his phone. He spoke quietly, turning his back slightly. I couldn't hear a word, but his posture was firm, calm. After he hung up, he slipped the phone into his pocket and checked his watch. I walked over then, telling him we needed to talk privately. He said we could talk at home. I pressed harder. He repeated the same line. Home. Later. Calm. No rush. The way he said no rush made me feel like there was something he had already decided that I wasn't part of. As we were gathering to leave, Ivy tugged at his sleeve and asked if he was coming home with us or driving separately. He told her he'd meet us later. She looked confused. I tried to smile and told her Daddy just had errands. She nodded slowly, unconvinced. When we reached the lobby, Jonas stepped aside to answer another call. A soft chime came from his phone before he picked up. The screen lit briefly with a calendar alert. Just a time and a place. Something about the specificity made my skin prickle. He spoke quietly again, ending with a steady, "Yes, that works." We stepped outside into the late afternoon light. Jonas opened his car door, paused, and looked at me for the first time with something like finality. Not anger, not resentment. Something settled. He said he'd see Ivy in the morning. Then he closed the door, started the engine, and drove away with a calmness that didn't match the storm building in my chest. I stood on the curb with Ivy holding my hand and my mother talking at my shoulder. The balloons rustled behind us. Cars passed. Parents laughed. Children chased each other across the grass. But inside me, something hollow opened, and for the first time, I wondered if Jonas's calm wasn't distance. Maybe it was preparation. When Jonas said he'd see Ivy in the morning, I tried to tell myself it wasn't a dismissal. He was tired. He was overwhelmed. He just needed time. That's what I told myself while walking back to the car with Ivy holding my hand, and my mother lecturing me on how husbands create problems out of thin air. None of it helped. The house felt colder when we returned. Jonas hadn't been back yet. His keys weren't on the hook, his jacket wasn't on the chair, and the quiet had a weight that made my skin prickle. Ivy asked if Daddy was mad. I said he wasn't, that adults just got stressed sometimes. She accepted the answer, but her expression told me she didn't really believe it. After she went upstairs to shower, I paced the kitchen. I kept checking the window, as if Jonas might appear any second. The sun dipped lower, staining the driveway orange. No headlights, no engine hum. Hours passed. When I finally heard the garage door, I exhaled hard enough to feel dizzy. He stepped in, carrying a plain folder tucked under his arm. He greeted Ivy gently, kissed her hair, and asked if she brushed her teeth yet. She nodded enthusiastically. He smiled at her, the soft smile I used to think was just for me. Then his eyes slid past me like I was a lamp or a piece of furniture. "I waited up," I said, forcing calm. "We need to talk." He nodded, but it wasn't agreement, just acknowledgement that he'd heard words. He placed the folder on the kitchen counter and started boiling water for tea. He didn't ask if I wanted any. He didn't even ask how my day was. I followed him like a shadow. "You can't keep shutting me out," I said. "This is getting ridiculous." He stirred the kettle. "I'm not shutting you out. You're not talking to me." "I will," he said, "when it's time." That sentence, "when it's time," felt strange, heavy, too deliberate. I asked where he'd gone after the party. He said errands. I pushed harder, asked what errands. He said personal ones. I told him he didn't need secrets. He said privacy wasn't a secret. The kettle clicked off, and he poured his tea like we weren't having a conversation at all. I grabbed his arm. "Jonas, look at me." He did. His expression didn't change. Calm, steady, unreadable. It was the stillness that scared me. "You're making everything worse," I said. "We can fix this if you stop acting like everything's already decided." He took a breath, then spoke softly. "Aureline, I'm handling things." "Handling what?" "Things," he repeated. "Properly." I hated that word. Properly. Like he'd rehearsed it. Like he'd chosen it carefully. Before I could say anything else, Ivy called from upstairs asking Jonas to help with her math homework. He went without hesitation, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen with boiling water fogging the window. Later that night, after Ivy went to bed, I planned to confront him again. I rehearsed what I'd say, that he was overreacting, that families don't fall apart over one stupid text, that he needed to stop making me feel like the bad guy. But when I knocked on the guest room door, something in the air made me stop. It wasn't fully closed, just slightly ajar. and I could see him sitting at the desk, sorting papers into neat stacks. His laptop glowed faintly. A small USB rested beside it. A notepad lay open, filled with Jonas's handwriting, dates, bullets, short phrases. I couldn't see the words clearly, but the organization felt too intentional to be random. He didn't notice me right away. His movements were slow, almost ritualistic, like he was checking each detail twice. I pushed the door a little. "Jonas," I said, softer this time. "Can we talk?" He didn't turn. "Not tonight." "That's not fair." "I'm not trying to be fair or unfair," he said. "I'm trying to be responsible." "Responsible for what?" He finally looked at me. That look didn't have anger in it. It had certainty. "For our future," he said. My breath snagged. "Our future? You're acting like... I know how I'm acting," he said. "I'm acting correctly." My hands curled into fists. "So what? You think being silent and dramatic is the correct way to handle a text message I already explained?" He didn't answer. He placed another paper in a folder labeled Utilities and closed it. "This isn't normal," I said. "You're making me feel crazy." "I'm not making you feel anything," he said. "I'm doing what I have to." That tone, steady, final, was worse than yelling. I stepped farther into the room. "Are you punishing me?" "No," he said. "Punishment is emotional. I'm not doing anything emotional." My stomach dropped. "Jonas, what does that mean?" He paused, considering his words like they were sharp. "It means I'm not reacting. I'm preparing." My throat tightened. "Preparing for what?" He didn't answer. He slid the notepad into a drawer, locked it, and stood. "I'm going to bed," he said. "You should try to sleep too." He brushed past me gently, not touching me but navigating around me with precision. When he walked down the hall, he didn't look back. I stayed in the guest room staring at the closed drawer. The locked drawer, the labeled folders, the USB, the perfect stacks of paper, the neat handwriting with dates I couldn't read. Something had shifted. Not just distance, not just coldness. Something planned. I went downstairs with shaky hands and sat at the dining table. The house felt too quiet again, like every sound was listening to me breathe. I tried calling my mother, but she didn't answer. I scrolled through social media, hoping for distraction, but instead, I saw another tagged photo. Someone had taken a picture of Jonas helping Ivy with glitter glue at the party. The comments praised him, called him patient, called him devoted. Not one mentioned me. I turned the phone off. Hours passed. Jonas didn't come back downstairs. I sat there until the lights felt harsh and the silence felt alive. When I finally stood to go to bed, something on the counter caught my eye. A small receipt I hadn't noticed earlier. It wasn't from a store near us. It was from somewhere downtown. The time printed on it matched the calendar alert I'd seen earlier on his phone. My skin prickled. I told myself I wasn't scared, but when I went upstairs, I locked the bedroom door. Not because I didn't trust Jonas, but because I didn't trust whatever he was becoming. And as I lay there staring at the ceiling, one truth pressed heavy against my ribs. Whatever Jonas was preparing for, I wasn't ready for it. The next morning, I woke up already tense, like my body knew something before my brain caught up. Jonas's side of the bed was untouched, perfectly smooth. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the hallway clock. I walked downstairs expecting to find him in the kitchen, making coffee like he always did before work, but the counter was empty. Only my mug sat there, still stained from yesterday. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. Ivy came down in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She asked if Daddy was taking her to school today. I forced a smile and said I'd drive her. She didn't argue, but she looked toward the guest room door, as if hoping he'd walk out any second. He didn't. After dropping her off, I sat in the car for a few minutes, hands tight around the steering wheel. I told myself Jonas was just at work early. that he'd text soon, that everything would settle before it got worse. But the buzzing in my chest wouldn't calm down. I decided to find him. The first place that made sense was his workplace. I drove there without even thinking, rehearsing lines in my head about how we needed to talk like adults. But when I reached the parking lot, his car wasn't there. I checked the time. Too early for him to be out on errands, too late for him to be stuck in traffic. I called again. Voicemail. I sat in the parking lot a few more seconds before deciding to drive downtown. I didn't know why, but the receipt from the night before kept floating into my mind. The address, the time, the calendar alert I'd seen. They lined up too neatly. I parked near the office tower the receipt listed and stepped inside. The lobby was huge. Tall glass windows, a reception desk, people in business clothes walking briskly with folders and tablets. I felt out of place, but I kept scanning the corners, the elevators, the hallways. Then I saw him. Jonas was standing near a row of chairs, holding a manila envelope. He looked calm. Not nervous, not stressed. Calm. A kind of calm I didn't recognize on him. He turned when he heard my footsteps. No surprise flickered across his face. No relief. It was like he expected me to show up eventually. "We need to talk," I said. My voice came out tighter than I wanted. "We will," he said. "Here." "Here," I echoed. "Why here? Why this building?" He didn't answer. He just looked past me briefly, then stepped aside like he was making room for something to happen behind me. That was when a man in a navy jacket approached. He looked down at a small clipboard, then up at me. "Aureline Marin?" I blinked. "Yes?" He held out a set of papers. "You're being served." The words hit like a cold drop of water. I stared at him, then at Jonas, waiting for someone to explain. But Jonas didn't flinch. The man placed the documents firmly in my hands. I felt the weight before I understood the words. Petition for divorce, temporary orders, financial disclosures, custody arrangements for Ivy. I felt my throat tighten. "Jonas, what is this?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even shift his weight. "It's what I've been preparing." "You're divorcing me? Over a text?" The words burst out in a half whisper, half gasp. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain." "You explained," he said softly. "I listened." "That wasn't explaining," I snapped. "That was damage control. I was upset. I acted stupid. But you're making it permanent. You're blowing everything up over nothing." He shook his head. "It wasn't nothing." I felt people staring. A woman near the elevator slowed her steps. Someone behind the reception desk glanced our way. I hated it. I hated being seen like this. "This is humiliating," I hissed. "You're doing this in public." "I asked to meet privately," he said. "You followed me here." Heat rushed to my face. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Words blurred. "You already filed," I breathed. "You already planned all this." "I planned responsibly," he said, "because Ivy deserves structure, and so do you." "I'm not some problem you can fix with paperwork," I snapped. "No," he said gently, "but I can protect us from more damage. That's what this is." My stomach twisted. "You're trying to take her away from me." His expression didn't change. "Read the order." I scanned the first page. My vision wobbled, but I caught the details. Shared custody, scheduled exchanges, financial boundaries, everything neat, everything methodical, everything designed to keep the peace Jonas always tried to protect. "This is cold," I whispered. "You're being cold." "I'm being calm," he corrected. I reached for him, but he stepped back. Not far, just enough that I felt it like a slap. "We were a family," I said, voice cracking. "You're choosing paperwork over us." He held my gaze, steady, unshaken. "You chose distance first. I'm just putting it in writing." Something inside me fractured. The lobby lights buzzed overhead. The papers shook in my grip. "Jonas, please," I whispered. "Don't do this to me. His voice stayed soft, steady, unbearably controlled. "This isn't being done to you, Aureline. This is accountability, that's all." The process server asked him to sign a receipt confirming I'd been served. Jonas signed without hesitation. No tremble in his hand, no pause. I stared at him the entire time, waiting for a flicker of regret. There wasn't one. When he handed the clipboard back, he turned toward the exit. Sunlight spilled across the lobby floor as the glass doors opened. "Jonas," I said again, almost breathless. "Come home, we can fix this. We can try." He stopped just long enough to look at me one final time. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't cold. They were certain. "I'm handling this properly," he said. Then he stepped outside into the bright morning, leaving me standing in the middle of the lobby with the papers trembling in my hands, every eye on me, every thought in my head collapsing into a single truth. He wasn't coming back.